Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Breaking just hours ago, promising new data on the vaccine front for kids, with Pfizer announcing positive results from a trial of its vaccine in younger children ages 5 to 11. We'll dig into this latest report as COVID cases in America's schools are climbing and the FDA readies its final decision on booster shots. Crisis on the Rio Grande. Unprecedented scenes out of Texas this morning, where thousands of migrants, most of them asylum seekers from Haiti, face an uncertain future. The Biden administration now cracking down on this latest surge, deporting hundreds by plane. We've got an exclusive look inside the migrants' makeshift camp. Plus, splashdown. One more moment for the history books from Elon Musk's SpaceX, as the all-civilian crew known as the Inspiration 4 safely returned to Earth just off the coast of Florida. We'll bring you a preview of our own Lester Holt's exclusive interview with the crew shortly after their historic touchdown. And the Emmy goes to quite a few streaming shows. A massive night in Hollywood with both Netflix and Apple clinching top awards for The Crown and Ted Lasso. We've got all the highlights, including the touching tributes to the stars we've lost. And that is a roundup that you were up late to gather for us.
Yes, late night, but got to talk with a few of the winners, and we both learned we really need to watch Ted Lasso.
Yes, I know, we really do, and we're talking about it so much, and I feel like if we don't do it soon, we're going to find out too much, so we need to very soon, so maybe that'll be something I do this weekend. All right, now that we begin with breaking news, as we mentioned, in the race to vaccinate children against COVID-19.
Pfizer released new data this morning suggesting its vaccine is safe and effective for children ages 5 to 11 years old. The pharmaceutical company says it now plans on submitting this data for emergency use authorization as soon as possible. Pfizer Clinical Research and Development Vice President Dr. Bill Gruber joined the Today Show just moments ago to talk about the trials. Take a listen.
We intend to submit the data by the end of the month. And then, of course, it will be up to the FDA to review that data and determine whether the vaccine can be released for broad use. And we hope that will go expeditiously. We're hopeful and expectant that the FDA will approve the vaccine based on the data we have. Now, why would that make sense? It makes sense because the level of antibody the vaccine is generating in children 5 to 11 matches the level of antibody that we know provides protection for individuals 16 years of age and older.
The announcement comes as COVID cases among children continue to surge across the country, overwhelming pediatric units and forcing some school districts to shut down. More than 5 million children have contracted the virus since the pandemic started. Nearly 13 million kids between the ages of 12 and 17 have received at least one dose of the vaccine. NBC News correspondent Gabe Gutierrez is in Spokane, Washington with the latest.
Joe and Savannah, good morning. Hospitals like this one are having to turn away patients from neighboring Idaho because they just don't have enough bed space. Nationwide, some schools have shut down in-person classes because of new COVID outbreaks. But now, some promising news about a long-awaited vaccine for young children.
This morning, Pfizer says its COVID vaccine is effective in children ages 5 to 11. The first of its kind trial for this age group included more than 2,000 kids and concluded the vaccine is safe, well tolerated, and showed robust neutralizing antibody responses. The children were given a smaller dose than the current vaccine used for those 12 and older. Pfizer says it'll now submit the data to the FDA for emergency use authorization. Potentially pivotal news, as pediatric COVID cases in the U.S. have jumped by 240% since July. New York City schools opened just a week ago.
And within 4 days, we have 812 positive cases, over 600 classroom closures, and one entire school building already closed.
In South Carolina, COVID cases have soared from 150 a day to more than 5,000. Schools and even entire districts there going virtual. And in Philadelphia, 5 schools have already closed.
And I can always tell you, this is the new norm.
Also this morning, more confusion over boosters after an FDA advisory panel voted Friday to recommend third shots only for people 65 and older or those with underlying conditions. The Biden administration had previously said a booster rollout for most Americans could begin today, but the FDA hasn't signed off.
I think people were not understanding the difference of planning for something and actually what element of that, what proportion of it you're actually going to roll out.
But while the vaccine and booster debates ramp up, healthcare workers in the Northwest, like those at Multicare Deaconess Hospital in Spokane, Washington, are battling their most dire COVID surge yet.
Over the weekend, 3 patients died in this ICU within 24 hours. And right now, this hospital is denying more than half of its patient transfer requests from out of state.
It's insane. It is very, very hard as healthcare workers to say no to patients.
And at this hospital, it is all hands on deck. But again, the breaking news from Pfizer, the company saying that its new data shows that its 2-shot vaccine is safe and effective for children 5 to 11 years old. The company says it expects results for children under 5 by the end of the year. Joan, Savannah?
All right, Gabe Gutierrez. Gabe, thank you.
This new Pfizer data comes as hospitals across the country are struggling to keep up with the rise of COVID cases. Listen to this. In South Carolina, for example, just this last month, new cases skyrocketed from an average of 150 a day to more than 5,000. And that uptick is impacting children directly, with one hospital in the state reporting they have 7 kids on ventilators. NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster joins us now from outside Sean Jenkins Children's Hospital in Charleston, South Carolina. Hi, Shaq. Good morning. So those numbers I just mentioned are pretty startling. Give us a sense of what you're seeing and hearing there on the ground.
Unfortunately, Savannah, it's pretty much what you heard from Gabe there in Washington in that last report. I mean, doctors here, and you look at the numbers across the state, they're saying it's the worst that it has been. You look at the new cases, broke a record of new cases last week. Hospitalizations broke a record last week. And this is not something that we saw with the first few waves where it's only impacting older Americans or mostly impacting them. You're seeing kids, children, get impacted by this significantly. I want you to listen to a conversation I just had with the medical director here of pediatrics here at this hospital. Listen to how she put it and the impact this is having on children.
Delta is different, and people need to understand that. South Carolina is currently ranked in the top 5 in terms of the case count for children, and also in terms of the percent of new cases that are children. In addition, the severity of illness has been quite different for children. Children are getting much more severely ill this go-round than in the prior waves.
We're talking about children on ventilators. We're talking about children using highly specialized equipment that essentially is a lung bypass. It's very dire situations that you're seeing. And you heard her message there. Delta is different than what we've seen before, Savannah.
Yeah, Delta is different. Exactly. All right. Now, Shaq, not only do schools in South Carolina not have mask mandates because of state law, they cannot enforce a mask mandate for students or faculty. So how do hospitals like the one you're at right now say that's impacting them, and have schools been forced to shut down?
Yes, you're seeing schools shut down all across the state. At least 2 entire districts are now virtual through the state. There are reports of nearly 24 schools, children at those schools that are home virtually learning. And yeah, you mentioned the point and the politics of it, that in this state, masks are not allowed to be enforced. There was a special provision that was passed over the summer that prevented school boards from enforcing, principals from enforcing those mask mandates. And you have doctors saying, look, the science is there. You know that masks can help slow the spread of this virus. And despite that, you still have these schools coming back. And you're seeing the impact of that, not only in the hospital setting, but in terms of kids contracting the virus in that school setting, Savannah.
All right, Shaquille Brewster with some heartbreaking and scary numbers. Thank you for your reporting.
NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel joins us now. So, Dr. Patel, let's talk about the big news with Pfizer's trial results on kids between 5 and 11. Here's what the vice president of Pfizer said about the reason kids may get a smaller dose of the vaccine.
So from the very beginning, we've worked meticulously to get to the right dose for adults and children. And so we looked at several doses early on in children and determined that 1/3 of the adult dose works just right for children to minimize the potential for side effects and provide the potential for protection. So we're really pleased with that outcome.
Dr. Patel, do you expect kids to get a smaller dose, and are there any side effects that parents should worry about?
Yeah, Joe, great question. And this is great news. Yes, we do expect, generally with all vaccines, Joe and Savannah, to have smaller doses. And just something to keep in mind, children are not just small adults. Lots of changes, not just with their weight, but hormones kind of as their metabolism ebbs and flows. So that's expected. And number two, your really critical question about side effects. We still need to see some of that full side effect data from Pfizer. We just saw kind of a top-line press release. I suspect, though, given what we've been concerned about, myocarditis, inflammation of the heart, we're all going to be looking for some of those side effects. But aside from that, you would usually expect, Joe, to see some of the side effects we see in adults. In fact, remember, for this pediatric trial, their control group was that 16 to 25 age range, which we do know about the side effects to date.
So, Doctor, once children in this age group do get vaccinated, do you anticipate this will have an impact on the current surge in COVID cases because of the Delta variant, or perhaps is this something that'll maybe make a bigger difference this winter?
The latter. I think, great question, Joe. I wish it could have an impact on what you were just covering with Shaq and Gabe. Unfortunately, it won't. First of all, we don't have the vaccine ready for kids, even if it's ready optimistically by Halloween. I do think that our case rates of Delta are declining overall in the country. You wouldn't know it if you're in Idaho, Washington, West Virginia, Tennessee, et cetera. But overall, we are seeing declines in case rates. However, to your point, I think this pediatric vaccine, along with a greater vaccination effort in the globe, signals what I hope is the end of this pandemic as we know it. We're seeing a true light at the end of the tunnel.
And Dr. Patel, quickly on this last point, booster shots. Today was the Biden administration's planned date to start rolling them out to everyone. On Friday, with the FDA panel, only recommend the third dose for Americans 65 and older and those at high risk for severe infection. Is this the outcome you expected?
It's not, but honestly, Joe, it's okay. We're going to all likely see boosters for all Americans, likely by the end of the year. We just need more data for the younger people. But we'll start with the older people in general, Joe. Those are the people who are due for them now anyway. It's not usually the 30-year-olds that are due in the month of September. Those will be later, and I suspect we'll have data to support the booster by then.
All right. As always, appreciate your expertise, especially this morning. Dr. Kavita Patel, thank you.
This morning, there's a growing crisis on the southern border where thousands of Haitian migrants are camping out under a bridge in a Texas border town. Over the weekend, the Department of Homeland Security started deporting some of them back to Haiti, and more flights are expected. NBC News correspondent Morgan Chesky is in Del Rio, Texas, where he's been given rare access to that migrant camp. Hi, Morgan. Good morning. So tell us, is the situation improving at all?
Yeah, Savannah, we have seen a drastic change in the last 48 hours of what has become truly a 24/7 operation. Authorities have gone so far as to shut down the only bridge from Del Rio into Mexico. And they tell me at least at this hour, they have temporarily stopped the flow of migrants over the Rio Grande River. Their focus today, processing this massive group of people whose future is very uncertain.
On the Texas border, an unprecedented, almost unbelievable scene. Nearly 15,000 migrants, most from Haiti, turning a patch of dirt beneath a border bridge into an immigration flashpoint. The group swelling so fast, Texas state troopers forced to park on the banks of the Rio Grande River as Border Patrol agents on horseback tried to slow the surge.
Our expectation is to have up to 3,000 migrants transferred out from underneath the bridge to our processing facilities or to a flight line within the next 24 hours.
Authorities granted our crew exclusive access to the makeshift camp. We witnessed men, women, and children huddling in whatever shade they could find, even creating makeshift shelters.
How long have you been waiting under this bridge?
This woman named Evo told me she's been here 8 days and grew visibly emotional when asked about the country she left behind. She tells me her mother is still in Haiti, but lost her home to a fire, adding everyone is suffering. The Biden administration's newly announced strategy calls for improved conditions here at the border.
After going, in some cases, days without food, authorities have now established these food handoffs here. You can see families coming through. They get a meal, they get a little water, enough to hopefully last them for the next day.
Federal plans also include deporting many of the migrants back to Haiti, a country in crisis following the recent assassination of its president and a devastating earthquake. The first flights have already begun, crews flying migrants from San Antonio to Port-au-Prince, Haiti on Sunday. Buses also running nonstop to the few processing centers that aren't overwhelmed. Now, after leaving one home behind, thousands wait today, uncertain about where they might be tomorrow.
And we know that right now there are still thousands left under this bridge. They don't know exactly where they're going to end up. The Border Patrol tells me they hope to have everyone processed in the next 7 days. But there is still a long road ahead, and there is no definite timetable on when this situation will finally be under control. Savannah?
All right, Morgan, thank you so much.
Democrats have been hit with a big setback to their legislative agenda. The Senate's parliamentarian ruled Democrats cannot include a legal pathway to citizenship for some 8 million undocumented immigrants in their $3.5 trillion budget package. NBC News political correspondent Ali Vitale joins us now with more on this. So, Ali, walk us through why the parliamentarian made this ruling and what it means for the Democrats' efforts to try to reform immigration.
Well, you hit the broad contours of this, Joe. This is the Senate parliamentarian coming out overnight and giving a ruling that Democrats had really been anticipating whether or not they can include immigration and a path towards legal status in this reconciliation bill. The parliamentarian, as you said, says no. And I was struck by 2 points of their reasoning in some of the documentation that we got overnight from our sources. I want to read to you just 2 pieces of that really struck me as why the parliamentarian says they cannot include this in the bill. She says that changing the law to clear the way to LPR, lawful permanent resident status, is tremendous and enduring policy change that dwarfs its budgetary impact. At another point in her reasoning in this statement, she says the precedent that this would set would be a stunning development, but a logical outgrowth of permitting this proposed change is further evidence that the policy changes of this proposal outweigh the budgetary impact scored, and it's not appropriate for inclusion in reconciliation. The shorter way of saying all of that is that this is just too hot and too far-reaching an issue to just slip through in a budget measure that Democrats are trying to use to only go it alone and have to avoid that filibuster or doing it bipartisanly and getting 10 Republican senators on board. This has been an issue, immigration, that has vexed senators for years and years. We've seen multiple iterations of bipartisan pushes on this. This is just one more setback for Democrats who hope to get it done this way.
Thank you for translating the parliamentarian language there. So what has been the reaction, Ali, from Democratic leadership, both on the Hill and in the White House, and what's next for Democrats?
Democrats on the Hill say that they are down but not out. I want to draw your attention to something that Senator Chuck Schumer and other top Dems who are working on this issue put out last night after the parliamentarian's ruling came out. They said in this statement that they've prepared alternative proposals and that they will be holding additional meetings with Senate parliamentarian in the coming days. That's one path that we're going to keep looking at as lawmakers are back on the Hill today, both the House and the Senate. Summer break officially over as all of this flurry of legislating starts to come to a head starting today. There is one other thing that they can do, and I want to caution that it's a long shot and also something that we aren't sure that Democrats are going to pursue, but they could decide to go against what the parliamentarian's ruling was and take a simple majority vote where all 50 Democrats have to be on board with saying that immigration should be included in this reconciliation package, and then the Vice President Kamala Harris can come in and break that tie. That is one way that they could go about that, but we've seen how hard it is to get all 50 Democrats on the same page for most of these policy items. That's a long shot, and we aren't even sure that they're going to go that route, but that is another option that's on the table. Nevertheless, this is a huge blowback for including immigration in this larger reconciliation package.
All right, Ali, thank you so much. Time for a check on your morning news now weather.
Bill Cairns is back with us. Hey, Bill.
Hey, good morning. So we're still in the peak of hurricane season. September is our biggest month, and we do have a lot of storms out there to track. but none of them are heading directly towards the United States, or really for any land areas for that matter. So let's show you. We have Peter, we have Rose, and then we have what we call an invest area just off the coast of Africa. So obviously the one that's closest to us is Peter. And by the way, we only have 4 names left on the list, and then we have to go back to the old Greek alphabet again if we get there, which we likely will, just like we did last year, 2 active seasons in a row. So first things first, let's go with Peter. This one is going to send some large waves to the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, but it's safely to the northwest of those areas, northeast actually at 245 miles. It's going to go north of Puerto Rico, and then it's going to do what we like and take a big curve out to sea and not head towards the east coast of the United States. Our friends in Bermuda still have to watch it closely, but you notice the wind speeds are not even that strong with that storm, which makes us very happy. So the forecast for today, we do have a couple issues. We will watch severe storms possible in between Minneapolis and Chicago, especially eastern Iowa, areas of southern Wisconsin. In the southeast, we'll have some heavy rain, flash flood threat, and look at how hot it still is. 101 in San Antonio today. Their record high for this date is 100, so you got a good chance of breaking that. And then tomorrow, that cold front will finally begin to move some cooler air to the south. Oklahoma City in the 70s. Everyone's going to be running around outside in the streets celebrating that. Dallas at 84 will feel so much better than 100 today. A little bit, it'll take them another couple days for San Antonio to get into the mix, but you get the idea. Another beautiful Tuesday in areas of the Northeast. So we're getting there, guys. It takes a while to cool off the south. 101 today in San Antonio is not fun.
No.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. September 20th. Ay. All right. Yeah. Thanks, Bill. And coming up, it's being called a, quote, tragic mistake by the Pentagon.
The continuing fallout surrounding an August drone strike in Afghanistan that killed 10 civilians. Next.
As every parent can imagine, this is an incredibly difficult time for the family.
Now back to one of our top stories as the search for Gabby Petito appears to have come to a heartbreaking end.
Yeah, police in Wyoming have discovered remains of a woman that is believed to be missing hiker Gabby Petito, but they have not confirmed yet if the body is hers. The discovery was made at a campground in Bridger-Teton National Forest, which is close to Petito's last known location inside Grand Teton National Park.
Petito was last seen with her fiancé, Brian Laundrie, late last week as they were traveling across the country, documenting each step of their journey through social media platforms like YouTube and Instagram.
And Laundrie himself, who was named a person of interest, went missing Friday night. Investigators were searching for him over the weekend. Now, the Pentagon admitted that an August drone strike meant to target ISIS-K terrorists actually killed 10 civilians. Now, their relatives are calling for compensation and punishment over the mistaken deaths. NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel has more on the latest revelations from the U.S. military.
Just before American troops pulled out of Afghanistan last month, the last U.S. military drone strike killed 10, including an aid worker and his 7 children. Now, following an investigation, the Pentagon admits it was a tragic mistake.
This strike was taken in the earnest belief that it would prevent an imminent threat to our forces and the evacuees at the airport. But it was a mistake, and I offer my sincere apology.
The strike came as American troops were pulling out of Afghanistan, and it was mayhem. The Taliban had just taken over Kabul, and Afghans were rushing to the airport, desperate to flee the country with American soldiers. An ISIS suicide bomber seized the opportunity and attacked American troops guarding a gate, killing 13 service members and nearly 200 Afghans. Afterwards, the Pentagon was on high alert for another ISIS attack, later bombing a car, saying repeatedly it stopped another ISIS bomber.
At this point, we think that the procedures were correctly followed and it was a righteous strike.
But right from the start, witnesses claimed the U.S. got it wrong and killed civilians. A New York Times investigation showed the target was carrying water jugs, not explosives. Now family members say their name has been unfairly associated with ISIS, and they want the U.S. to help them get out of Afghanistan. We're not criminals. We did nothing wrong. We're just innocent civilians, he said.
Let's take a look at what else is making news around the world this morning.
Yeah, Matt Bodner is back with us this hour from Moscow. Good morning, Matt.
Savannah, Joe, good morning. Well, let's start this one off in Rwanda, where Paul Rusesabagina, a former hotel manager who sheltered hundreds during the 1994 Rwandan genocide, was found guilty of taking part in a terrorist plot. Now, this name may sound familiar to you guys. He was played by Don Cheadle in that film Hotel Rwanda, and he was actually arrested last year on arrival from Dubai after returning from what he described as an apparent kidnapping attempt by the Rwandan government. He has become one of the regime's most prominent critics globally. Moving on over to Russia, where the pro-Putin United Russia Party is claiming victory in legislative elections that were held over the weekend. They've retained not only a majority in parliament, but also what's looking like a constitutional supermajority, holding on to it. The vote, however, has, of course, been rife with claims of electoral fraud, and many opposition candidates, those who did get on the ballots, appear to have lost only after much delayed online voting results started rolling out across the country. We are still waiting on a large number of ballots from the Moscow districts, but the story looks like it's going to be very much the same there, those very close races on paper. So we may yet see many allegations of electoral fraud before the day is through. And finally, we go to space, where China has launched an uncrewed resupply vessel to its new Tiangong space station. The supply mission launches just 3 days after the station's first crew safely returned to Earth after 3 months aboard. Today's launch of a resupply vehicle sets the stage for Tiangong's next crew to launch in October. The next crew will remain aboard for 6 months, doubling that previous crew's record, setting new records for the Chinese space program. So, as always, good storyline to watch. Back to you guys.
Definitely. So much space news.
Getting
these
crowded
days.
up there.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Matt.
Coming up 4 years ago today, Hurricane Maria wreaked havoc on Puerto Rico.
Yeah, so where do rebuilding efforts stand in 2021? Well, we'll take a closer look up next.
History buffs and auction goers and really rich people are keeping their eyes on a rare document set to hit Sotheby's this November, a first edition copy of the U.S. Constitution.
This is crazy.
Document, just one of 11 surviving copies, was first printed in 1787 for the delegates to the Constitutional Convention and for the Continental Congress. The piece up for auction is the only copy that remains in private hands, and it carries, get this, an estimated price tag of $15 to $20 million.
Got it.
I guess I'm not surprised. That seems like really cool and really precious. So
yeah, I'm not surprised it's expensive. I'm kind of surprised that it's allowed to just be sold and held in private hands and not, I don't know, kept under lock and key somewhere that we could all go visit. But, you know.
It's the one, I guess.
Exactly.
The one that we can all
The one of the 11 that
own.
somebody, exactly. All right, thanks, Joe. Now, in honor of Hispanic Heritage Month, we're highlighting some members of our NBC News family, and they're sharing how their heritage impacts their professional and personal lives.
So I am Colombian, born and raised in a little city of Bucaramanga, Colombia.
My grandfather is originally from Mexico. My grandmother is originally from Spain.
It's a little complicated, so I'm half Puerto Rican, and my mom is from Maine.
Having the experiences with my Hispanic family absolutely influences the way that I look at almost every story that I do and the way that I approach all of the stories that I try to do.
So much of covering politics is not only understanding the candidates, but understanding the communities that these candidates are trying to get in touch with.
Especially when covering Latino issues and Hispanic issues, I go in there with more kindness and more humanity because I see myself in the people that I cover.
I, as a Mexican American, don't know what it's like to be a Venezuelan American or a Colombian American.
And I think there's a lot of nuance between what it means to be a Miami Cuban or, you know, you're El Salvadorian in Los Angeles or you're first-generation Mexican in, you know, McAllen, Texas.
It's important to not have just one singular Hispanic producer, correspondent, or even interview subject, because that one person's experience is not a reflection of the whole community.
Para mí, el idioma español es como una llave.
Usted entiende más, usted se puede relacionar más con esa gente.
Most people look at me and think I speak Spanish, and I feel bad that I'm not able to be fluent in communicating with them. It took me a while to realize that not speaking a language doesn't take away from the experiences I have from making tamales in their kitchen when I was a kid, and listening to the music, and experiencing the food and the culture and the family.
I moved to the U.S. in August 31st, 2006. I was 11 years old. My mom and I, it was so much colder than we thought it was going to be. We lived in Jersey, and to warm ourselves up, we would come to the city and just kind of go to the touristy spots. And 30 Rock was one of those spots. We walked right in front of Rockefeller Center and we took a picture. It's a terrible picture. There was like people behind us. It's not well framed, but it was one of the first times where we kind of saw like the magic of the United States. So we took that picture 15 years ago, right over there. And then now today, September 2021, I'm an associate producer at the same building that we stood in front of. There's nothing more important than your cultural identity and your language and where you come from. Va a ser parte de usted de aquí hasta que no estamos en este mundo.
4 years ago, the monster Hurricane Maria smashed into Puerto Rico, devastating the island and killing thousands. The storm barreled onto shore just a few miles an hour shy of a Category 5 hurricane. The severe winds leveled homes and knocked out power for months. Catastrophic death toll left morgues overwhelmed. As the waters receded and cleanup began, Maria became the third costliest hurricane in U.S. history. All this time later, the island is nowhere near prepared for another storm as strong as Maria. NBC Latino reports the island's antiquated power grid has not been modernized. Joining us now is the writer of that piece, NBC Latino reporter Nicole Acevedo. She's been following the years-long relief effort from the start. Nicole, this hurricane ravaged Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, as it tore through the Caribbean. What is the current state of the recovery efforts as we sit squarely right now in hurricane season?
Well, Joe, the reality is it depends who you ask. If you ask the average Puerto Rican living on the island, you know, they're constantly reminded of Hurricane Maria when you see buildings that are still not rebuilt, that are deteriorating, when you see homes still with blue tarps, that just signals, wow, this recovery has not picked up its pace yet. However, if you ask government officials, they would tell you about all the money that has been disbursed already. So government officials in Congress allocated at least $63 billion to repair and for the reconstruction of Puerto Rico after Maria. But about 71% of that money have not even made it to communities yet.
So, Maria, let's focus on the electrical grid. There were rolling blackouts and brownouts in Puerto Rico in the months after Hurricane Maria. What is the state of the island's power systems now?
Well, the power system, what's keeping the lights on in Puerto Rico is the patchwork recovery that happened just after Maria. A lot of those funds that were approved by Congress were supposed to be to rebuild this power grid that was completely decimated and triggered a complete blackout on the island in the aftermath of Maria. But a lot of that money, at least about $10 billion, that's supposed to go to modernize the electrical system in Puerto Rico, was just disbursed last May. So what you see right now is the government officials on the island trying to get to speed, trying to start projects. So hopefully by next year, we can see a more stable grid.
All right, Nicole Acevedo, thank you so much for your reporting. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All week long, we're featuring a series of stories across all our NBC platforms, taking a look at climate change and its effect on the environment.
Yeah, and right now we're taking a look at seafood and why it's shrinking and you're paying more for less. NBC News correspondent Ann Thompson explains.
Beauty is on the banks and plates of Washington's Puget Sound. Yet in the kitchen of Ivar's Mukilteo Landing, a disturbing sign of the times, shrinking salmon.
This is a beautiful portion right here. But then all of a sudden today, when I go in to look into the box, I get one like this.
Executive Chef Craig Breeden will send the smaller piece back.
10 years ago, how often would you get a piece of fish like this, and how often do you get it today?
10 years ago, we wouldn't see anything like this.
What Breeden sees is backed up by a recent scientific study.
The salmon sandwich.
The salmon he gets from Alaska are shrinking as much as 8%. Why? Scientists point to salmon returning to fresh water at a younger age from a hotter ocean. On the East Coast, it's clams.
Climate change has devastated the shellfish industry in Maine.
Chad Coffin leads the Maine Clammers Association.
In 1976, when it was still cold, we harvested anywhere between 35 and 40 million pounds of soft-shell clams a year, and last year we were under 7.
Whether in Maine or here in Washington state, the problem is the same, warming waters, and that's impacting the foods you love to eat. Seattle is synonymous with salmon, but here in the Ballard Locks, biologist Lauren Ergensen says fewer salmon come back to spawn.
We attribute that to climate change.
How do you know it's climate change?
So we have decades of air temperature data and water temperature data.
Ideally, the water should be no warmer than 59 degrees. But over the last decade, it's too warm as much as 92% of the time when the salmon return.
So you have to have 350,000 sockeye to be able to fish in our watershed, and that hasn't happened in almost 15 years.
All this means shrinking choices on Ivar's menu. King salmon is now a rarity.
It might only be a nightly special versus having it on the core menu.
And prices are higher, as they are for clams in New England. This clam shack paying $100 more a gallon. Driving prices up and supplies down, invasive green crabs that thrive in warm water and feast on clam, destroying food and culture.
Clams out of Maine, what cowboys out of Texas.
Salmon is vital to our economy, and it's vital to our ecosystems.
Now under siege from climate change. Ann Thompson, NBC News, Seattle.
And coming up, another giant leap for mankind from Elon Musk and SpaceX.
We'll bring you part of Lester Holt's exclusive interview with the history-making Inspiration 4 crew, now safely back on Earth. That's
so
next.
awe-inspiring.
Welcome back. Tequila distilling has typically been a man's world, but now there's a new master in town. NBC News Now anchor Allison Morris sat down with Mexico's first female master of tequila.
Cheers. Cheers. Feliz Día de la Independencia. Happy Independence Day, September 16.
And to you.
My name is Berta González Nieves, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Tequila Casa Dragones.
A small batch tequila brand with strong connections to Mexican Independence Day.
The name Casa Dragones, it also has the number 16. That is the address of our house, but it's also the date of Mexican independence, which is September 16.
Named after Los Dragones, a cavalry from San Miguel de Allende that launched Mexico's break from Spain.
The first conspirational meeting to plan the movement of Mexican independence was done in San Miguel de Allende by these two generals and their team. San Miguel de Allende, it's our spiritual home because a lot of the inspiration for our brand came there.
Much of that inspiration also from González Nieves herself, the first female tequila master in the world.
This is my passion. Tequila is like my life's work. So I started obsessing about the idea of becoming an entrepreneur, and I went to a party in Brooklyn.
A chance meeting with Bob Pittman, the founder of MTV, and Casa Dragones was born.
We saw eye to eye that the opportunity in the category was really about showcasing that tequila has everything to be able to compete with other very established categories like single malts, like whiskeys, like cognacs. That's what we saw was the opportunity, to prove that, and to prove that the spirit really should be sipped and savored, should be admired by its craftsmanship and its quality.
Tell us about the very, very first tequila that you offered, the very first Casa Dragones. What was it? What about it was so unique?
We fell in love with this blend of white tequila with extra aged tequila that has been aged in New American white oak barrels. And we did this beautiful master blend. So you're getting the floral and the citrus notes of the Blanco tequila balanced with the sweetness and the spice of the extra aged tequila.
So in 2009, Casa Dragones Joven came to life. Every bottle made by hand.
We decided that we wanted to do an old-style decanter made modern to transmit the idea of sipping and to also showcasing, the meticulous attention to detail that we have in our liquid, in our packaging. So after that, doing our Joven for 5 years, we thought that the right next step for us was to bring a Blanco tequila that is focused on actually showcasing the purity of our agave and the purity of our water through an ultra-modern process.
In June of 2020, they introduced their third tequila, the Añejo Barrel Blend.
We wanted to showcase the tequila in a way that it could actually not only seduce the tequila lover, but also, the whiskey lover.
They also jumped in to help their fellow restaurant and bar owners in the midst of the pandemic.
From doing the bartender exchange program to do grants for bartenders across Mexico and the U.S., to really partner on doing cocktails to go, providing our partners with bottles so that then they can actually use that as a vessel to sell the spirits, to partnering with the USBG, with the James Beard Foundation. We made a donation from out of our sales from Reserve Bar to go to the James Beard Foundation for the Open for Good campaign, and really just trying to, within our means, try to be supportive.
What a difficult thing to do, though, to be that nimble as a small batch producer.
It's really more about how you collaborate with each other that really connects with the consumer and brings life to the category. So I think that we keep that very close to our heart, and we take it very seriously.
For a young person who's watching this today thinking, wow, she's living her dream, what would you say to that person about starting something of their own, being the first female master of tequila?
I wish for all those young women out there that they have the opportunity to find a subject, an industry, or a service that enables them to truly go on a journey to discover their potential, because I think that is the real reward is all about. Dedicate yourself. Don't take anything for granted. There's no door that you can't open.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Now, Gonzalez Nieves says her mother was the driving force in her family growing up and helped inspire her to be the woman she is today.
Great business story there. Let's do our CNBC Money Minute and get the rest of the big financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you.
Silvana Henao joins us again. Hey there.
Hey, good morning. All right, well, the Chinese version of short video app TikTok, known as Douyin, will limit users to under 14 years old to 40 minutes a day. In a blog post, parent company ByteDance added that as part of Douyin's youth mode, teens under 14 will be able to access the app between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m., but not outside of that window. The move follows new restrictions from the Chinese government last month on younger Chinese users' access to video games. Meanwhile, Amazon is adding more sponsored product ads to the top of search results before any organic results as it expands its dominance in online shopping. That means for the brands, the price of doing business on Amazon continues to go up. With fewer organic search results appearing on the page, the only way for consumer brands to get their products near the top is to buy their way there. But it's not only big consumer product makers taking up the valuable virtual real estate. Amazon is also populating search results with its own products. And millionaires are increasingly worried about how much their fortunes to leave for their kids. According to a new survey conducted by The Motley Fool, the survey asked 2,000 high net worth individuals about their attitudes toward inheritances, and 67% of respondents said leaving too much money for their heirs was among their top concerns. Respondents worried that the wealth would be used irresponsibly or it would cause beneficiaries to be lazy. But despite concerns, 34% of respondents said they plan to leave over 50% of their assets to their heirs. Back to you.
Wow.
Quite the problem to have.
That's
all right.
loaded. Yeah. All right, Silvana, thank you so much.
The 4 Americans who made history on their trip to space are now back on Earth. The all-civilian crew of the privately funded Inspiration 4 splashed down Saturday after spending 3 days in orbit.
Yeah, and our Lester Holt sat down for an exclusive interview with the crew, fresh off their incredible journey to space.
Show of hands, who would still rather be up there? Really?
That last view of the Earth and the cupola made me emotional.
Wow.
Because it was just so awe-inspiring, and I knew I'd be thinking about that for the rest of my life.
They've been back on Earth for just over a day, but the crew of Inspiration 4 is already missing that spectacular view from space.
Our name is Inspiration, and to be able to capture that view and to bring it back to Earth is special.
Feel this sense of awe.
The historic all-civilian space crew blasted off last Wednesday after training with SpaceX for 6 months. The team spent 3 days orbiting the Earth, more than 300 miles from the planet.
Each of us have been changed in a way that maybe we didn't expect. And for me, it was
being able to see the Earth in a way that made me realize there is so much to see in person that I need to go and find those places and explore more.
Dr. Cyan Proctor piloted the mission, becoming the first black woman to serve as a spacecraft pilot.
Being able to talk to, girls of color and women of color about my experience, and even older women who sometimes when you think that, the best part of your life has passed you by as you've gotten older, that there's still a lot to learn and a lot to explore and a lot to do.
You wanted to be an astronaut for a very long time. You applied at NASA, got into the finals at one point, but didn't make it. How sweet is it?
It's just amazing. This is the best way that I could ever imagine going to space, with these individuals in this way with SpaceX. I'm thrilled.
Technology entrepreneur and billionaire Jared Isaacman paid for the trip and served as the mission's commander.
Where can this be taken, this whole idea of putting non-professional astronauts in space?
And I think if orbital spaceflight is just the exclusive domain of a couple of countries and the select few, I don't know how far we're going to get. So I think having organizations like SpaceX that are working very hard to drive down the cost of spaceflight, to make it more accessible for others so that all of us can go out and journey among the stars.
Isaacman used the trip to help fundraise millions of dollars for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, where 29-year-old Haley Arsenault works as a physician's assistant after surviving pediatric cancer herself as a child.
Haley, did you have any idea how much you were inspiring people here on Earth?
No, and that's hard for me to wrap my head around because I think of myself as an ordinary person, but I hope that people can relate to me.
But isn't that the point? You are an ordinary person?
Yes, I am.
Isn't that the appeal of all this?
Yes. I've had some difficulties in life, but I think everyone has in some way. I think everyone has had to overcome something. And I hope that people can look at my story and know that holding on to hope that there will be better days is so important.
What an incredible conversation, and be sure to tune in to Nightly News with Lester Holt for the rest of the exclusive interview with the Inspiration 4 crew as part of our special series, The New Space Race. And coming up, inside television and streaming's biggest night, we'll bring you all the highlights from this year's Emmy Awards, the winners, the speeches, and the touching tributes to the stars we've lost. That's up next.
The Emmy Awards returned last night. The show was mostly in person following last year's virtual ceremony. TV's biggest night was really big for streaming, especially for Netflix shows. The Queen's Gambit and The Crown led the way, each winning 11 Emmys this year.
The Emmy goes to The Crown.
For The Crown, a long-awaited coronation. In its fourth season, the popular show about the royal family finally won Best Drama and swept all 4 acting categories.
Making The Crown has been the most rewarding 2 years of my life.
I wish my dad was here to see this. So I lost my daddy during COVID, and he would have loved all of this.
Well, some of the nominees appeared remotely. Most were there in person.
I gotta give a shout out to Sesame Street.
The show kicked off with a giant sing-along beneath a massive air-conditioned tent in L.A.
Let me start by saying there is way too many of us in this little room.
Tonight's festivities led by host Cedric the Entertainer.
Lock the doors. We're not leaving until we find a new host for Jeopardy!
In the comedy categories, another streaming show, Apple TV Plus's feel-good soccer series Ted Lasso, snared 7 Emmys, including Best Comedy and Lead Actor for SNL alum Jason Sudeikis.
I want to thank folks at SNL. I want to thank Lauren, who went to go take a now. Perfect.
Jason Sudeikis just won and took the stage. Thanked you, but realized you weren't there because you're here talking with us right now. So what's your message to Jason?
I was so happy for Jason, and he'll be coming back soon to SNL. So I'm very happy about that as well.
Jean Smart grabbed her 4th career Emmy for playing a Vegas comedian in the show Hacks.
I have to acknowledge my late husband, Richard Gilliland, who passed away 6 months yesterday, and I would not be here without him.
The night also honored beloved performers who recently died. SNL alum Norm Macdonald.
I'd like to pay tribute to one of the best we ever had, Norm Macdonald. Thank you.
and nominee Michael K. Williams, best known for his role on The Wire.
Michael, your excellence, your artistry will endure. We love you.
The night's most powerful speeches aimed at empowering women, from Governor's Award winner Debbie Allen.
It is time for you to claim your power, claim your voice, say your song, tell your stories.
To Mayor of Easttown's Kate Winslet.
I just want to acknowledge my fellow nominees in this decade that has to be about women having each other's backs. I support you. I salute you.
To I May Destroy You's Michaela Cole.
I dedicate this story to every single survivor of sexual assaults.
Despite record nominations, no actors of color won in the major acting categories last night, sparking the hashtag #EmmySoWhite. But RuPaul did make history last night, becoming the most awarded black artist in Emmy history with 11 career wins now. RuPaul's Drag Race took home the award for Outstanding Competition Program.
Yeah. So many, 11.
Yes, over the career. Just been winning year after year after year as of late. So.
Amazing. All right. Also, before we go, a reminder, NBC News now has a new program launching tonight. Top Story with Tom Yamas will bring you all of the day's biggest stories every night at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can tune in right here on NBC News Now, again, starting tonight.
That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.